Imagine waking up one morning to find a stranger standing in the corner of your room. They don't move, they don't speak, they just watch. Their eyes are identical to yours. Their face, eerily familiar. You blink, and they vanish into the wall. But somehow you know they're still there, following you. You go through your day pretending nothing happened, but you feel them everywhere. In the way you hesitate before telling the truth, in the sudden burst of anger you can't explain, in the shame that comes for no reason at all. They are always there, silent but heavy, shaping your choices before you even make them. Carl Jung referred to this presence as the shadow. Not a ghost, not a demon, but the part of you you've tried hardest to bury. It's the face you hide when you want to be liked. It's the thought you swallow before it escapes your lips. It's every selfish desire, every violent impulse, every shameful memory you tell yourself you've moved past. The paradox? You think you've escaped it by ignoring it, but it's in that ignorance that it grows stronger. Because here's the truth Jung understood. What you refuse to face in yourself does not disappear. It rules you from the dark. Think about it. The friend who lashes out over the smallest insult. The leader who insists they are humble yet craves endless validation. The person who preaches morality yet hides their vices in the dark. We see their contradictions clearly, but when it comes to ourselves, we're blind. Why? Because our own shadow wears our skin too perfectly. It speaks in our voice. It convinces us we are good, rational, above all that, while it quietly directs our actions from below the surface. You've probably felt it in ways you can't name. That strange pleasure when someone you envy fails. The way you secretly inflate your achievements to feel superior. The compulsive need to be seen as the good one in every room. And yet, you deny it. Because to admit it would shatter the fragile image you've spent years building. But here's the great question, the one that should keep you up at night. If your shadow is always there, influencing your thoughts and actions, how much of your life is yours? How many choices have you made thinking you were free, when in reality, you were just acting out a script written by the parts of yourself you refuse to see? Jung believed that until you confront your shadow, until you drag it into the light, you are not truly living your own life. You are a puppet, and the strings are pulled by everything you repress. And this isn't just a personal issue. Societies have shadows too. The evils a culture denies, its hypocrisy, its hidden cruelty, always leak out somewhere. You see it in politics, in corporations, in public scandals. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you ban it from the conscious mind. It simply finds another door. The irony is almost cruel. The more you deny your shadow, the more power it has over you. The more you pretend it isn't there, the more it shapes your reality. You can spend your whole life trying to be good, only to find that the goodness you clung to was a mask, one the shadow wore to hide its deeper grip on you. Here's the unsettling truth Jung hinted at. The shadow is not your enemy. It is a part of you abandoned. And what is abandoned always comes back, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently, until it is seen. But most people never look. They are terrified of what they'll find. What if the person in the corner of the room isn't a monster, but you? What if every flaw you hate in others is just a reflection of the part of yourself you've buried? What if the very thing you fear most, seeing your true self, is the only path to freedom? You can run from your shadow your entire life. You can distract yourself with work, with relationships, with endless scrolling, with alcohol, with positive thinking. But it will follow you into every friendship, every romance, every career. And one day, it will force you to stop. The question is, will you wait until the shadow destroys what you love before you turn to face it? Or will you dare to meet it now, before it's too late? And here's the twist. Facing your shadow is not about conquering it. It's about becoming whole. Because until you stand in the same room with that stranger in the corner and say, "I see you," you will never truly see yourself. And if you never truly see yourself, then who exactly is living your life? The shadow isn't an accident. It's not a glitch in the system of your mind. It's the system itself. At least, the part you weren't meant to see. From the moment you were born, you began a quiet negotiation with the world. You learned that certain parts of you were welcomed, your smile, your curiosity, your eagerness to please, and other parts were dangerous. Your anger made people uncomfortable, your sadness was too much, your wild imagination was unrealistic. Bit by bit, you carved yourself down to fit into the shape the world demanded. You told yourself you were becoming a better person, but in reality, you were amputating pieces of your soul. Carl Jung understood this process deeply. He called it the persona, the mask you wear to survive in society. The persona is not evil, it's necessary. Without it, you couldn't function in a world that expects order and predictability. But the price of the mask is steep. Everything that doesn't fit its image gets pushed into the unconscious. That buried pile, your unfelt emotions, your unwanted impulses, your repressed memories, that's your shadow. And here's the first philosophical punch in the gut. You didn't choose what became your shadow. Your parents, your teachers, your culture, they decided which parts of you were acceptable and which needed to be hidden. You inherited not only their rules, but their fears. A child born into a strict household learns to hide their curiosity about taboo subjects. A child taught that vulnerability is weakness learns to mask all pain with a smile. By the time you're an adult, you're not just carrying your own shadow, you're carrying the shadow of generations before you. Nietzsche once wrote, "Man is something that shall be overcome." But how can you overcome yourself if you've never even met your whole self? How can you grow if you're only working with the parts you've allowed to see daylight? Jung's answer was stark. You can't. Because here's the second blow. Psychologically speaking, the shadow is not dead matter. It's alive. Neuroscience now supports what Jung sensed intuitively. Your unconscious mind is constantly active, influencing your emotions, decisions, and even your physical reactions. Those unacknowledged desires and fears, they're not sitting quietly. They're shaping your life behind your back. And it's not just about personal impulses. Jung saw the shadow as a collective force. Entire societies have shadows, cultural blind spots, moral hypocrisies, buried histories. Germany in the early 20th century had a collective shadow that erupted into one of the darkest chapters in human history. Jung himself, watching from the sidelines, warned that what is repressed on a mass scale will eventually explode, which leads to an uncomfortable realization. Your shadow isn't just your problem. It's the point where your unconscious and the collective unconscious touch. Every unacknowledged prejudice, every hidden resentment, every quiet cruelty you keep to yourself, these are the seeds that grow into cultural violence when multiplied across millions of people. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. In other words, you don't control the root of your desires. You only control their expression. And if your desires are shaped by a shadow you've never examined, then how free are you? Here's the cruel irony. Society will praise you for wearing your mask well. It will tell you you're disciplined when you hide your rage. It will call you kind when you suppress your boundaries to please others. It will label you mature when you ignore your grief and keep working. But beneath that applause, the shadow rots in the dark. And when it finally breaks through burnout, through addiction, through sudden acts of cruelty, you'll tell yourself, I don't know what came over me. That's the point. You don't know, because you've never looked. This is where Jung's insight becomes both liberating and terrifying. The shadow will not be integrated through moral perfection, positive thinking, or spiritual bypassing. You can't kill it. You can't heal it in the way people often imagine. Why? Because the shadow isn't just the ugly parts of you, it's also the parts you need to live fully. That assertiveness you call selfishness, it's the same energy you need to protect your boundaries. That envy you're ashamed of, it's a signal of the life you secretly want but are too afraid to pursue. That anger you bury, it's the fire that can push you toward justice.
Your shadow contains both poison and medicine. To reject it entirely is to reject your potential. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote that suffering without meaning leads to despair. But to find meaning, you must confront reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. That means facing the darkest parts of yourself with unflinching honesty. And yet, most people never will, not because they can't, but because they are terrified of dismantling the identity they've built. The persona is comfortable, predictable, safe. To strip it away and meet your shadow is to risk discovering that you are not the person you thought you were. That the good version of you was only half a story. That the other half is darker, wilder, more dangerous, and more alive than you imagined. And here's the trap. The longer you avoid your shadow, the stronger it becomes. The more you deny your rage, the more it leaks out in passive-aggressive remarks. The more you hide your fear, the more it shapes your decisions in silence. The more you suppress your grief, the more numb your life becomes. The mask you thought was protecting you is, in reality, suffocating you. This is why Jung warned that integration is not a luxury, it's a necessity. If you refuse to do the work, the shadow will do it for you, but in ways you can't control. And when that happens, it's not just you who pays the price. The people you love, the communities you're part of, the world around you, they all feel the impact of your unexamined darkness. So here's the question that bridges us into the next stage. If the shadow is inevitable, if it cannot be destroyed, and if ignoring it only gives it more power, then what, exactly, is it doing to your life right now without you even realizing it? All right, Faisal. Here's Section 3, The Unseen Consequences, 800 to 1,000 words. This part will make the reader feel the shadow's grip, showing exactly how it infiltrates life without being noticed. The shadow rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock on your door in broad daylight and say, "I'm here to ruin your life." It whispers. It nudges. It rearranges the furniture of your mind so subtly that you think you moved it yourself. And before you know it, your entire life has been bent around its hidden architecture. Consider this. You get into an argument with someone you love. The disagreement is small, hardly worth remembering, but you feel an irrational fury bubbling up. You say something cruel, sharper than you intended. You see the hurt in their eyes and feel the sting of regret. You tell yourself, "That wasn't me. I didn't mean it." But it was you. It was the shadow. the part of you holding on to every unspoken resentment, every humiliation you've swallowed over the years. It waited for the perfect moment to surface, and it chose now. That's the first unseen consequence. The shadow controls your emotional detonations. Every time you explode out of nowhere, every time you sabotage something good, every time you react far beyond what the situation calls for, that's the shadow pulling the strings. The second consequence is even quieter and far more dangerous. The shadow shapes your choices long before you make them. Imagine you're offered a new opportunity, a job, a relationship, a creative project. Outwardly, it seems perfect, but something in you hesitates. You tell yourself it's practical caution or bad timing. In truth, it's fear, the kind that was planted in you years ago and buried in the unconscious. Maybe as a child, you were punished for standing out, so now your shadow whispers, "Don't risk being seen." Maybe you once failed spectacularly, so it hisses, "Don't try again, stay safe." And so you decline the opportunity, not realizing that the shadow just made a life-changing decision for you. The third consequence is social. The shadow hides in your relationships, warping how you see others. Jung called this projection, the act of seeing in others the traits you refuse to see in yourself. You might despise someone for being arrogant, not realizing it's your buried arrogance staring back at you. You might envy someone's freedom, not realizing it's your repressed desire for liberation you're resenting. Projection is the shadow's favorite trick because it allows you to stay blind. It keeps you pointing outward so you never look inward. And entire relationships, friendships, marriages, rivalries are built and broken over projections that neither party recognizes. Then there's the fourth consequence, one most people never connect to the shadow: chronic dissatisfaction.
You can achieve everything you thought you wanted, money, status, approval, and still feel hollow. Why? Because the life you built wasn't chosen by your whole self. It was chosen by the curated half you show the world. The parts of you that wanted something different were buried alive, and now they haunt you as an unnameable emptiness. You might call it boredom, or depression, or a midlife crisis, but in Jungian terms, it's the soul demanding the return of its missing pieces. And here's where the shadow's most insidious consequence appears. It convinces you it doesn't exist. The human mind is wired with cognitive biases, mental shortcuts designed for survival, not truth. One of these is confirmation bias, the tendency to seek evidence that supports what we already believe. If you believe you're a good person, you'll ignore or rationalize anything that challenges that belief. So when the shadow emerges, you blame stress, or bad luck, or other people. You tell yourself, "That's not me, that's the situation." And with every excuse, the shadow slips further out of reach. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. Living in bad faith with your shadow means you never have to feel guilty, but you also never grow. Meanwhile, the shadow grows restless. It doesn't just sit in the dark, it festers. The emotions you refuse to feel don't vanish, they ferment into something more potent. Your repressed anger can turn into chronic bitterness. Your buried fear can morph into constant anxiety. Your unacknowledged grief can manifest as physical illness. Modern psychology confirms this. Repressed emotions have been linked to everything from high blood pressure to weakened immune systems. The mind and body are not separate kingdoms. When one hides its wounds, the other bleeds for it. And if the shadow feels cornered long enough, It stops whispering. It erupts. This is when you see out-of-character acts, someone living a respectable life suddenly committing a betrayal, a crime, or an act of self-destruction no one saw coming. Friends say, "I can't believe they would do that." But the shadow had been building toward it for years. The only surprise is that it finally broke the surface. On a collective scale, this is how societies collapse. When a culture represses its own shadow, its violence, its greed, its injustice, those forces eventually explode in revolutions, wars, and moral panics. The horrors don't come from nowhere. They are the shadow's overdue bill. And here's the part that should unsettle you most. Right now, as you read this, your shadow is making choices for you. It's deciding who you trust, what you fear, what you pursue, and what you avoid. It's shaping your relationships, your ambitions, your moral compass. You might think you are steering the ship of your life, but if you haven't faced your shadow, you're just a passenger, sitting at the wheel of a vessel that's already been programmed to drift towards certain shores. So the question becomes, how much of your life is truly yours? How many decisions were made for you before you even knew you were deciding? How much love have you lost? How much potential have you abandoned because a part of you you've never seen said, "Not that way"? The truth is brutal. Until you meet your shadow face to face, you will mistake its voice for your own. And yet, this is where a door opens. Because if the shadow is already shaping your life in secret, imagine what could happen if you stopped running from it and started listening. Not obeying, not submitting, listening. This is the beginning of rebellion, not against society, but against the unconscious prison you've been living in. And rebellion starts with a single act: turning to the stranger in the corner of the room and saying, "I know you're there." Every prison begins with walls you cannot see. Every rebellion begins the moment you realize they are there. Facing your shadow is the most dangerous and liberating rebellion you will ever wage, because you are rising against your oldest captor, yourself. Carl Jung warned that integration is not for the faint of heart. This is not about fixing yourself or becoming perfectly moral. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness means owning everything you are, especially the parts you've been taught to reject. The first step is radical self-honesty.
You can't free yourself from a prison you refuse to admit exists. That means dropping the mask. Not in front of the world, but in front of yourself. Ask questions that sting. When was the last time I lied? Not to others, but to myself. What do I judge most harshly in others, and why does it bother me so much? What am I most afraid people will discover about me? Your answers will feel ugly at first. That's how you know you're getting close to the shadow. The second step is shadow mapping, a concept Jung hinted at which modern psychology has adapted. Keep a journal, but not of your best moments. Write about your irritations, your envy, your secret desires. Note when you overreact to something small. Every extreme emotion is a breadcrumb leading you to the part of yourself you've buried. This is not an exercise in self-condemnation, it's reconnaissance. You're learning the terrain of your inner battlefield. The third step is reclaiming the exiled parts. Here's the paradox. The traits you've locked in the dungeon are often the very ones you need to thrive. The assertiveness you called selfishness may be the key to protecting your boundaries. The ambition you labeled arrogance may be the engine of your potential. The grief you tried to ignore may be the door to deeper compassion. This doesn't mean indulging your worst impulses. It means owning them so they no longer control you from the shadows. You become the master of the energy, not its prisoner. The fourth step is facing your projections.
When someone triggers a strong emotional reaction in you, whether it's admiration, disgust, or envy, pause before you judge. Ask, what in them is showing me something I have denied in myself? It's uncomfortable. You will find pieces of yourself in people you despise. You will also find pieces of yourself in those you idealize. Both are part of your shadow, calling for recognition. The fifth step is integration through conscious action. It's not enough to understand your shadow intellectually, you must give it a seat at the table of your life. That means making small, deliberate choices that acknowledge its existence. If you discover you've buried your anger, practice expressing it constructively. If you've hidden your creativity, share something you've made, even if it terrifies you. If you've repressed your need for rest, take it without apology. Every time you consciously act on a piece of your shadow, you weaken its grip on your unconscious behavior. But here's the truth most people avoid. Integration is messy. You will fail. You will slip back into old patterns. You will see yourself act in ways that make you cringe. And this is where most people quit, thinking the shadow is winning. But the very fact that you notice is proof of progress. Before, the shadow ran your life in silence. Now, you hear its footsteps. This is what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You don't kill the darkness. You learn to walk beside it. History is full of those who turned their shadow into strength. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, admitted in his meditations that he often felt anger and pride, but instead of denying them, he used them to sharpen his discipline. Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, could have buried his rage. Instead, he channeled it into an unbreakable fight for justice. Frida Kahlo took her physical pain and grief and poured them into art that still haunts the world. They didn't erase their darkness. They forged it into something unignorable. And here's the most counterintuitive truth of this rebellion. When you integrate your shadow, people will feel it, even if they can't name it. You will carry a presence they can sense. You will no longer be fragile because you will no longer be split in two. The things that used to manipulate you, guilt, fear, shame, will lose their power because you've already looked them in the eye. This doesn't make you invincible. It makes you real. But you must be prepared for resistance, not just from within, but from others. Society prefers you to be predictable. It likes you in your mask. When you start making choices from your whole self, people who benefited from your compliance may push back. Friends may say, "You've changed," and they'll be right. You have. That's the price of freedom. Some will walk away when they can no longer recognize the version of you they controlled.
The question is, are you willing to lose the comfort of their approval to gain the reality of yourself? Because this rebellion is not about becoming who the world wants you to be. It's about becoming the only thing you were ever meant to be, whole. And wholeness is not light without dark. It is the dance between the two. When you reach this stage, the stranger in the corner of the room will still be there, but they will no longer watch in silence. They will walk beside you. And in their face, you will no longer see something to fear. You will see the part of you that refused to die, even when you tried to kill it. That is the truest rebellion, not conquering the shadow, but reclaiming it as your own. And when you do, you will finally understand why Jung said, "The gold is in the dark." There comes a moment, if you're brave enough, when you realize the shadow was never chasing you. It was leading you. All those breakdowns, those inexplicable bursts of emotion, those moments you thought were failures, they weren't random. They were signals. The shadow was speaking in the only language it had left: disruption. You see now that the shadow is not the enemy. The enemy is the lie you've been living without it. This is the final paradox Jung leaves us with.
The parts of you you've most feared are the very ones you've needed to become whole. Think about every myth, every ancient story that has survived for centuries. The hero always begins in ignorance. They meet a monster, a dragon, a creature lurking in the dark. At first, they try to kill it. But the deeper truth, the one we forget, is that the monster always guards something precious. Gold, a key, a treasure that cannot be found anywhere else. The dragon is your shadow. The treasure is the life you were meant to live. But here's the catch. You cannot steal the treasure without facing the dragon. And the dragon cannot be slain. It must be befriended. This is why your shadow follows you everywhere, not to haunt you, but to force you toward the one confrontation that can free you. The ultimate truth is almost unbearably simple. You are not complete without what you reject. The love you've been searching for, it will feel empty until you learn to love the parts of yourself you've despised. The strength you admire in others, it already lives in you, hidden inside the traits you've been taught to suppress. The freedom you crave, it comes the moment you stop hiding from yourself. Jung wrote, "One does not become whole by remaining in the light. The light alone blinds you. It gives you half a life, pleasant, safe, predictable, but hollow. The darkness is not there to destroy the light. It is there to make it real." This is where the old self dies. Not the self you show to the world, but the self that is fractured, the one split into acceptable and unacceptable. When those two finally meet, when you look your shadow in the eyes and say, "I claim you," something happens that no book, no lecture, no philosophy can prepare you for. The world changes shape. It's not that problems vanish. Pain doesn't disappear, but the fear that once ruled you loses its teeth.